Hello and welcome. I am Scrubberlock, and this is City of Heroes on the Rebirth server. We are with Quintessence last, our level 28 brute, who has 810,000 experience earned, 44,000 to go to get to level 29 in our next two slots for enhancements, and 1.67 million influence. And we are on a story arc. And you've missed a couple of things. I filmed an hour or so last night. I did record it. It recorded correctly, there weren't any audio problems, but I don't feel like it's worth posting it. And the reason is that almost the entirety of it was me in an outdoor mission. You had to defeat 4 freak bosses, and I couldn't find the last one. And I basically had to go through the whole mission, tab targeting, until I finally got him. And I spent a lot of that mission just grumbling about outdoor missions, and I don't think it would have been any fun for anybody to watch it. So I'm not going to post that, and instead we'll just continue with the Freak Olympics. Our contact says that we've had a lucky break in the Freak Olympics. It seems like one of the freaks you brought in, one of these bosses, I guess, cracked under police questioning and told us about the next event. You won't believe this, but it's a scavenger hunt for council gear. It's supposed to take place in council bases, but it gets better. The freaks responsible for scheduling the event, a juicer called Kerner, is going to be in one of those raids. If you can catch him, that'll give us a break. Okay, so we're going to go to Independence Port, and we're going to go get Kerner and his crew. And we're getting pretty close to leveling up. We have 3 beads to go, and now we're getting close to the 30s, where we start getting 3 enhancement slots every odd level. This will happen starting after level 32, so we get 2 slots at 31 and 29, and then we get 3 slots at 33, 34, and so forth. We start getting slots 2 out of every 3 levels, and only powers every 3rd level after 32. So we have 1 more power to get, probably our stealth power at level 30. Level 32, then we have Midnight Grasp. 35 and 38 will be Energize and Overload, and then it's time to start thinking about our epic pool powers and which one we want to take. It'll probably be Energy Conservation or whatever it is, the one that's got those abilities in it, although this character of all my characters has by far the least endurance issues, because she does have 2 area effect abilities that enable her to, if they hit multiple targets, raise that endurance bar up. I'm really looking forward to having this character fight the endurance draining enemies like the Malta Sappers and the Carnies and just see how she does, because if they drain her endurance, she can just get it right back. Saw that Lesser Devoured over there, and if it was like a red boss, I might have stopped to fight him, but a white boss is a couple levels below us and not worth stopping for. So we're skipping past Terra Volta here. Already been in that zone to hunt Sky Raiders a couple times. Not sure, I don't think I filmed it, but there's basically nothing in there. I really feel like they, even from launch almost, other than Paris Park, they really kind of missed the target with the hazard zones. I understand what they're there for, but they're so completely devoid of any reason to go in there. I feel like, something more like a fault line would have been better right from the beginning in all of the hazard zones. Of course, fault line was not the way it is now either right then, when the game launched. And, they thought that people were going to do a lot more sort of street hunting, I guess. Ugh, come on. Alright. So, yeah, I mean, to some degree, I guess people, played the game differently from how they expected. Also, the developers decided they didn't want people street hunting. They wanted them to do missions and story arcs. And, of course, they did a really good job of adding more missions and story arcs, but that took people off the streets. Nobody street hunts anymore. Everybody does story arcs, or they do the architect, which is what most people do. Right, with farming. Don't know how much architect work goes on Rebirth compared to Homecoming. There's a pretty extensive... Is this a pathway here? No, it's just a dead end. There's a pretty extensive architect building community on Homecoming, I think, and certainly a lot of farming missions in the architect. I don't know how much of those there are, how many of those there are on Rebirth. I know there are some. I don't think it's anywhere near as extensive as what you can find on Homecoming. So our goal is to bust Kerner and his crew. But Kerner is a freak show. So theoretically, all these council guys are technically optional. At least the way I understand the instructions. Sometimes the instructions kind of lie to you, but most of the time they're telling the truth. And so if like we had a stealth character, right, we could go through this mission and ignore all the council, because we're not really here to beat up the council, we're here to beat up the freak show guy and his crew. And there you go, we just raised our endurance up to max with 1 power, which is nice. I do like that this character can both self-heal and self-recover. It means we can afford to focus more of our inspiration sockets on things like accuracy, or damage, or luck. Okay, let's keep going. So there was an interesting poll on D&D Beyond. I'll say what my answer was to the poll in D&D Beyond, but it really made me think of City of Heroes. And the question was, what's your favorite level range to play in, to DM for, actually? It was, what's your favorite level range to DM for in D&D? But I also thought about it in terms of, well, what's my favorite level range to play? And before I answer that about D&D, let's talk about the game at hand, City of Heroes. And as you guys know, I really enjoy the low-level game in COH. I think it's really fun. I like having to, you know, think about how to deal with spawns, you know, pulling gets old if you have to do it all the time, but I like, that's it, that was the boss. Oh god, so weak. I like the fact that you have to think tactically, and you have to either pull or, you know, have the right inspirations or both to win at a battle, and even at +0, right? Versus, say, when you're 50th level, 45th level, and you're able to just go in at +3 × 4 and crush everything, and you don't even have to think about it, and you never even use your inspirations. I mean, that feels really fun and cool and powerful, but it's also, this is too easy. And I really like the challenge that you get from the lower level game. Now, I think the super low level game may be a little bit too, make you a little bit too weak, shall we say. And I think I like a little bit more power, but I think like I feel like the 20s are maybe my favorite level range. They've got, on the hero side, the 2 best story arcs in the game, Wheel of Destruction and Scroll of Tieleku. You fight some really fun enemies like the freak shows. You fight the family, although we haven't fought the family here. You fight the Banished Pantheon, who are my favorite faction to fight. And you're in Talos Island, which is a really cool zone. You start getting your single origin enhancers, but you don't have enough slots yet on your powers to really make them like super awesome, right? If you look at our slots, we only have, and I'll show you in a second, only 1 or 2 of our powers are fully slotted, and all the rest of them still are going to need some slots. So we fully slotted Shadow Maul, but we still need 2 slots on Smite, 3 on Shadow Punch and Siphon Life. We still need slots on all these other powers. So we have single origins and maybe some invention enhancements on these things. Kinetic Shield and Power Shield and Dampening Aura and Energy Project, and they're finished. So you got like 5 powers, 7 powers finished, if you count these 2. But we have like 8 or 9 or 10 more powers that still need slots. And so what I really like about it is you're getting more powerful, your character can do a lot, you're starting to come into your own, but you're also still growing, and your character still has some weaknesses and still has doesn't have all the power that they're going to have in, say just another 5 or 10 levels. Once we start getting 3 slots every for 2 out of every 3 levels, we start getting, by the mid to late 30s, we're going to have so many slots that all of our powers will be fully enhanced. And that's fine, that's cool also, but I feel like it makes us so powerful that it kind of blunts some of the challenge of the game, and that's where you have to, try to up it to +2 and +3 and times 2. And so I really enjoy, I think, the 20s. I think they're my favorite level range for a character. Um, and I think my second favorite would probably be the teens, because you've got your DOs and you're starting to come into your power a little bit, but you're not super powerful yet. The only negative, I think, of the teens would be that there are a lot of times with a lot of characters you're sucking wind a lot and you're struggling with endurance problems, and I'm not in love with always having to take knees over and over again due to endurance, but I still like that play style. And then I guess I would go 30s, and then the level 1 to 10 range, and I think I would probably put the 40s, 40, 41 to 50. I would probably put that at the bottom as my least favorite in the entire game, because although it's awesome and you're super powerful, it's also not as much of a challenge. And a lot of the mobs that they came up with in the 40s are kind of annoying. And a lot of the story arcs are just outdoor mission after outdoor mission after outdoor mission after outdoor mission, where you got to go through this whole mission to find one needle in a haystack. And I don't really like that as much as the earlier missions, where you're just going through a 3 level office and you beat people up. And so I feel like there's it's a much more, I don't know what the word is. It's less complicated and more interesting at the lower levels, both playing your character because you don't have as many powers that you have to click on, and also what the engine is trying to do for you. And so I feel like, the 20s are my sweet spot. I feel like this is the golden age of my superheroes, especially like upper 20s. Right around now is kind of my favorite time. We've got a lot of our good powers in. We just got our level, 26 attack power, which usually is something cool. We just got our level 28 defensive power, which is usually something pretty cool. And you've got most of your primaries and secondaries in. Your character's coming into its own. But it's not so powerful and so slotted out that you can just mow down everything. And the stories at this level, Freak Olympics are also a really good story arc. I think some of the best story arcs are in the 20s as well. So this is my favorite level range in City of Heroes. Feel free to comment on what's your favorite level range and why in the comments. So that list of Freak Olympic events is just exactly what we need. So he gave us a list. Now we can start anticipating their attacks and beat them to the punch, right? So, thanks to that Freak Olympic schedule you got, we should be able to stop the freaks before they can do too much more damage. Apparently, the next scheduled event involves breaking into a research lab and stealing high-tech equipment. Can you prevent this? So, one of the cool things I think about this story arc is they send you to different maps. So, you haven't seen this all, but we've been at an outdoor map in a ruined office. We've been in a warehouse. We've been, now we're going into a lab, right? And so they have you on different maps. We were just in a council base. So it's almost like you go through one of every type of map that they have when you're doing this story arc, which I think is pretty cool. I think that's better than some of the story arcs where you're just going through sewer after sewer after sewer, or tunnel after tunnel after tunnel after tunnel. Now, we will be going back to Croatoa once we hit level 30, but our contact said she can't really talk to us until we're level 30. So, D&D. My answer is actually the same for both playing and DMing. I said I like in D&D they have tiers, right? They consider like tier 1 to 4, level 1 to 4 to be tier 1. You're like local heroes, and then level, what is it, 5 to 9, I guess, is tier 2. Now you're regional heroes, and I'm gonna have to pause the game because the phone is ringing. Okay, we're back. Sorry about that. More spam calling. Tier 2, I think, is where I left off, is levels 5 to 9, and that's kind of like the your heroes of the region, right? Regional heroes, and then levels like 10 to 15, your heroes of the kingdom, right? And then levels 16 to 20, you're like heroes of the universe or the plane or whatever you want to call it. And this is actually kind of similar to City of Heroes. Obviously, there are a lot more levels in City of Heroes, but I think I would have the tiers be, 1 to 11 because there are no DOs, right? And that would be your sort of the local hero just taking care of stuff in Atlas Park and Kings Row. And then, and most of the stories are you're fighting thugs, you're fighting skulls and hellions, and trolls, right? And then I would say tier 2 is like 11, 12 to 22, where or 21, where you only have DOs, and you're fighting some bigger guys, some bigger mooks, as it were, and you start fighting Sue, and you start fighting outcasts, and some slightly tougher guys. You get some council and some Circle of Thorns going, and you're fighting Dr. Vajalak, who's trying to poison the entire city, and that sort of thing. And then, tier 3 would be level, the 20s, right where we are. This is tier 3, where you're kind of fighting citywide menaces. And then tier 4, there'd be really 5 tiers in City of Heroes. Tier 4 would be, in the 30s, where you're fighting perhaps national threats potentially. And then tier 5 would be the cosmic threats, the interdimensional threats that you're fighting in the 40s. And you're fighting Malta and Carnies, but you're also going to other dimensions and going to a world where, the Council conquered the Earth and stuff like this. And so... So yeah, I said my favorite tier, both to DM and play, is tier 1. And slightly different in City of Heroes, of course. I've already mentioned my favorite tier would be tier 3, which is in the 20s. But in D&D, it's tier 1. For DMing, it's a sort of clear and obvious reason, and that reason is that in tier 1, the characters don't have a lot of abilities yet. And especially the spellcasters don't have very powerful spells yet. And they have enough spells that it's kind of cool and they can use them a few times a day. But they can't cast Wish and Resurrection and, speak with other planes and all of these things that are really, kind of spoiler destroying. They're just full of spoilers. You can't even have a murder mystery because even at like 4th, 5th level, because there's a spell called Speak with Dead, and you could just just wake the guy's corpse up and say who killed you, and that's kind of the end of the murder mystery. And it's like, well, how can you have a mystery when the cleric can actually ask the god for answers and get 5 yes or no answers from the god? How can you fight an enemy? Like have an enemy be cool when the players can just banish him to another plane and fight all of his minions without him, and then when he comes back, they have to fight him. They can fight him alone. There are so many what are called save or suck powers in D&D, where if the villain fails his saving throw, he's going to just be done for the battle, and they can throw it on round 1 and then just crush the guy. And so many players are willing to do that, and it's like, well, I wouldn't be. I'm like, I want to actually have a real battle. And so, D&D put into place this thing called legendary monsters, and they give them legendary saves, which allows the GM to just be like, nope, that really powerful spell you just cast, I'm going to let him save it, right? It says they can choose to save instead of fail a save 3 times if it's a powerful legendary creature, up to 3 times. So you can basically, if the wizard has 3 level, say 7 spell slots, you can just save against all 3 of those spells, and he can't use level 7 spells against the bad guy. I find that really a huge artifice. I don't really like that. And I just feel like having characters that can just resurrect each other from the dead and cast Wish and stuff like this, it sounds really cool. But how, as a GM, how do you even challenge a party that can wish the enemy to lose? right? I mean, somehow you have to do something like limit the wish in some way, like say, um, like the villain can save against the wish somehow, or you have to allow the players to basically wish the campaign to end. In which case, I would say, well, why don't you just wish it in real life and we can not play? Somebody actually said this. The one guy came up with this wish that I guess he thought was a like loophole-less, right? Because classically with wish, the GM looks for any loophole to make the wish backfire, and that's kind of what you traditionally do, especially if it seems like the players are abusing it. And so what he said was something like he wished that all enemies they were going to face from now into the future would simply not exist. And I said, if one of my players wished them, and people were talking about ways you could make that go bad, right? But I said, actually, I wouldn't do that. What I would do is stop DMing and say to my player, look, do you want to play D&D? And if he said, well, what are you talking about? I said, well, you're wishing not to have adventures. You just had your character wish not to go on adventures because you wished all the enemies in the adventures wouldn't exist. So do you not want to play? Because if you don't want to play, we can play something else. Right? But if you want to actually play the game, why are you wishing not to have enemies? That's supposed to be part of the game. Right? It's sort of like the people who, like idle out in the entrance of an architect mission while somebody else levels them up and they just start at level 50. What they're doing is saying, I wish I didn't have to play to level 50. Now, it's understandable. There's an end game and they just want to play end game. And so they're coming up with a solution. I don't really want to play, so I'm just going to get my character leveled. And that's a lot smarter than saying, well, I'm going to go into the game and press a button that says that I'm leveled. Well, then why are you playing the game? I don't know. I feel like it's one thing to sort of level your character up to max and then play endgame. But that's not what this guy was doing, because he was actually asking for the all enemies in the future not to exist. That would include the ones in Endgame, right? The person trying to get to Endgame wants to fight the tougher enemies. I can understand that. That'd be like a player saying, "I want to wish us to go to the Outer Planes and be 20th level so that we can like fight Demogorgon." I'm like, okay, if I'm the GM, I say, all right, well let's just go to the Abyss with 20th level characters and fight the demons. We could do that. But to say I'm going to wish that all the bad guys don't exist is like saying I'm going to wish I didn't have to play D&D, right? So I guess what I should have said before is it's one thing to go to endgame, right? To say I want to get my character to endgame. It's another thing to say I want to get my character not only to level 50, right? But I want to get my character to all the way to the top of the incarnates 100%, get all the incarnate abilities and all the badges for beating the incarnate enemies in the incarnate trials. Then you don't really, and I just want to get them, right? I just want to add them to my character sheet. Well, I mean, you can go ahead, but that's not playing City of Heroes, right? So anyway, back to tiers. At the higher level tiers, you can do stuff like wipe out an entire layer of enemies with a single spell, and therefore not have to play the game. And the GM has to realize that your character has the ability to wipe out an entire layer of enemies with a single spell, and make sure he's got a counter for it. So if you're trying to do a murder mystery, you have to make sure that you have to make sure you wrote a mystery where the murder victim didn't see the killer, because otherwise they can just solve the mystery by being talked to. You have to make sure that clairvoyance and some spell that lets you see the past and mind reading and stuff. I mean, oh my gosh, that was one of the first things I realized I was going to have to worry about. Is I have these statues that nobody's supposed to know about in the temples, and there are these women who wear white garments. They're based on the Vestal Virgins, but they're not Vestal Virgins because it's not Vesta who's the goddess. But they're like serving the statue, and one of the clerics saw them. And I thought, like, as soon as they see these guys, the first thing my players are going to want to do is mind read them, right? And to make them tell who is this mysterious goddess in the back of the temple that we have a statue to, and what's the secret she's guarding. Now, these guys don't know everything, but they know the name of the goddess, and I don't want the players to know this. So I had to give all of these Vestal Virgins, as it were, these pendants that they wear that are basically thought shields, which I didn't want my world littered with all this magic and just having regular old, you know, low-ranking, non-leveled clerics, just regular old priestesses who are just servants, sort of slave level and like NPCs wearing magical pendants that block mind read, right? But because you can mind read people by like third or fifth level in D&D, I had to find some way to protect them because otherwise the players are going to read their minds and solve the mystery. And it's like, okay, well, let's stop playing because the whole point of this adventure is for them to piece the little facts that I'm giving them together to come up with the story. I mean, I could have just told you the story, but there wouldn't have been any mystery there, right? I mean, I have the story written. I could just email it to you guys if that's what you want. So now I've got to protect my NPCs from mind reading. I've got to protect my NPCs from the Zone of Truth spell. One of the reasons that there are laws in Rome that you can't just cast spells on the street is I thought maybe that would curtail them from doing this sort of thing in public. It hasn't worked too well. It's worked a little bit. But as we get into the higher levels, as a DM, I have to do more and more and more sort of pre-planning to stop the players from just saying, I'm going to throw a roll of the dice, and if I succeed, I get the answers. And I don't have to, as a player, work for them or solve the problem or think about it at all. And you don't have to worry about that at 3rd level, but you do at 13th. And so that's why my favorite tier as a DM is that low-level tier where the players have to get by on their wits as players because their characters really can't do much more than a normal real person in the real world would be able to do. And I find that to be much more fun to game master. So he says, it sounds like all the freaks at that lab were members of the Upstart faction, a group of freak show dedicated to the total anarchy and the end of all government. Their leader, a young freak named Upstart, was like a living messiah to them, but he was captured several months ago. If they're planning on breaking him out of the brick house, that could take their Freak Olympics from bad to worse. I didn't mean to close that. So let's go on. How are we doing on time here? Let's keep going. It's getting a little long, but let's go ahead and keep going. We have another Freak Olympic event going down, and this one is big. Apparently, Drex set a number of targets for arson, including a warehouse holding all the new computers at Paragon City's elementary schools. That's low, even for them. With all the money budgeted for a post-war reconstruction, I doubt the city can afford any more computers. Can you please go save the warehouse? Sure, we can do that. And that is an Independence port. So I talked about why, as a DM in D&D, I like the lower tier because I feel like it's just so much harder to set problems that challenge the noggins, the minds of the players. You can challenge the characters with like really powerful enemies, but challenging the players with problem solving that they have to do themselves, very hard to set up a problem that they can't just solve by casting a spell or a special ability. I mean, the cleric in the party now, just whenever he needs to talk to somebody who he knows who's not there, he just casts sending, and he can remotely ask questions. So that's becoming, hard to deal with. It's hard to keep secrets because he can just contact people and ask them what's going on. And so I wanted to have the players, show up in the one town and find out that a Roman city had been conquered and by the same enemy that the players are starting to learn about. And instead, they found out while they were still learning about that enemy on the adventure, because the cleric was able to cast sending and talk to his uncle, and his uncle was near the front. And I'm like, well, the uncle would know this, so I had no choice but to have the uncle tell him what was going on. So they found out like 2 weeks before I wanted them to find out that the city had been conquered, and it was a lot less of a surprise when they showed up, and the Roman army had kind of encamped around the town that used to be kind of this little town in the middle of nowhere, right? Because they kind of knew, well, of course they have to do that because one of these cities has been conquered, right? And that's kind of spoilerish. And, so DMing, I definitely prefer the low-level characters because I can challenge the players and I can keep secrets from the players that will keep the story suspenseful and interesting instead of them often finding out secrets long before for a suspense purposes, you would want to reveal those secrets. Again, it's not like me against the players. That's not what's going on. But there is a level of sort of suspensefulness that I'm trying to generate, a level of mystery that I'm trying to generate, and some of those spells make it really hard to do that. And there's a glowy, but we're going to defeat these guys. As a player, I feel the same way. I prefer the lower level gameplay, and I think I do because again, it's more about me using my noggin to solve problems and less about me using my character's uber abilities to solve problems. I think that just like in City of Heroes, where I feel like once you get into the 30s and 40s, you get to be too powerful, and it becomes the challenges almost become trivial, and you have to set everything up to +2 and +3 just for it to be a challenge. I feel the same way about Dungeons and Dragons. It's really cool to be able to fight a big, powerful creature like a dragon, which you can only do when you're high level, and that's awesome. But on the other hand, I also prefer playing the rat catchers, playing the guy who is rescuing the little girl that went down the well and was, trapped by goblins, rather than being the guy who's traveled to the dimension of the abyss and is trying to defeat Orcus or something. I mean, that's cool, but it's so disconnected from anything remotely realistic that it's not that it's hard to roleplay about, but I just don't find it as satisfying. It's a lot more fun to me to be able to roleplay about that more down-to-earth stuff, like the little girl that was lost down a well, or, just like the superhero that rescues cats out of the trees, and or even like in this game, one of the things you do really early on, and I've mentioned this before, is you're in Atlas Park helping people against, like just muggings on the streets. And when you get to high levels, they just don't bother to have you stop muggings anymore. The muggings don't even bother to animate them in some of the zones. And I feel like that's a shame, because to me, that's a really important part of being a hero. And I enjoy doing that at low levels. I think it's super fun to be the hero that saved a single kidnap victim, rather than always being the hero that's like saving an alternate dimension from being conquered by the psychic Clockwork King or something, which is just so over the top. You're fighting Galactus instead of fighting bank robbers. And I rather fight the bank robbers. I just find that more street level heroing to be a lot more satisfying. Well, we over-aggroed here. That's alright. We'll be fine. Let's see if I can get more people in my cone. There we go. That's a good cone attack. So yeah, in City of Heroes, my favorite tier is kind of the mid-tier, the 20s. And that's for a combination of the abilities starting to come in, and you have SOs now, but you don't have so many slots that your character's running around fighting purples all the time. And you have more abilities, but not so many abilities that you don't even have room on your hotbar for them. And so I feel like that's a really good sweet spot. D&D, I feel like the best level is probably first level, and it goes down from there. I really like low-level D&D. Second, third level are fine. Fourth is like... I almost feel like fourth is where it could end for me. I don't need to go any further. I feel like going above that just makes a character so ridiculously powerful. And it just becomes so extraordinary that you're basically playing... almost like a demigod. And why have I missed 4 out of the last 5 times? The heck was I rolling there? 79, 78, just got unlucky. 97, 95, yep, just got unlucky. Yeah, so I mean, I like some aspects of high-level gameplay, and it's always fun to see the character grow and get more powerful. But it's definitely one of the reasons why, you know, my best friend is always arguing for, oh, we should start at like 3rd or 5th level. And when you ask him why, like at one point I said to him, you know, I really like, no, I always want to start at 1st level. And he's like, why? Why can't you start at 3rd or 5th? I said, because I like starting at 0 and working my way up. I like the way that feels. I like watching my character grow. I think also it's because I happen to like those low levels better. And I said to him, don't you like watching the character grow? And he said, yes, I do. But the problem is, and this is understandable, most campaigns never get there. You know, we're playing a year, and they just hit level 6 a few weeks ago, right? They'll probably hit level 7 right around the 1st anniversary of play, right? And now they're finally starting to get powerful and feel like they can do a lot. Well, most campaigns don't go much more than a year. And so most campaigns, if you're lucky, you'll get to level 7. You'll never actually play level 7, right? You're just going to get to it, and then the campaign's going to stop, right? Because you've been playing for a year, and the DM's tired, and the players don't want to play anymore, and somebody's just had a baby or what have you, and you just can't keep the group going. And so you end up with, you know, most of your experience being playing the first 5 levels, and you got some level 6, and you got to become level 7 but didn't play it, and now the campaign's over, and then when the next person says, I'm going to DM, let's start at level 1 again, well, you end up in a Groundhog Day, right? I understand that why he says this, because he's, you know, had the experience of, I've been playing D&D for 3 years and have never gotten over level 6, because every time we get there, the campaign ends and we start over again. But personally, since I like the lower levels better, I actually, you know, I do like seeing my character grow, definitely. But I actually am not sure that I would mind playing a series of 1-year-long campaigns that went from level 1 to 7 and stopped. Because I think at that point, the characters have gotten so powerful that my preference is the lower level gameplay, and I would rather play the lower level guys. But that's me. That's just me. I also like long campaigns. So, you know, although I wouldn't mind stopping at 7th level and starting over again, I would probably prefer a longer level 1 to 7 trip, right? Instead of it being a single year, I'd be perfectly happy to like gain like 1 level a year. And be level 1 for a year and level 2 for a year and 3. I mean, like, I'm fine with that. That'd be awesome. A lot of people wouldn't. They'd get tired of being level 1. You know, and I think eventually I'd get tired of it too. Maybe not a year. But I certainly wouldn't mind it if it took us 3 or 4 or 5 years to get through like 7 levels. Because I don't mind the lower level game. And in fact, most of the time I prefer it. Alright, some more freaks here. How many canisters do we need? 4 firebombs? I hear 1. Man, these guys are not even missing me a little bit with my smashing defense and lethal defense. Goodness. Just chop, chop, chop. Just hacking into me. There's another one. 3 to go. Have we done on the... Oh, we missed a whole section. We're going to have to go back. I wonder which crate's got the computers. Not going to steal them or anything. Just wonder which crate's got the computers. Yeah, one of the things my good friend has said he always wanted to do was like planar adventures. I've never been a fan. I'm not a huge fan of the DC multiverse. I feel like it's too big. It's trying to be all things to all people, right? So they've got a plane for every pantheon of gods, and they've got planes that for pantheons of gods that didn't exist outside of D&D, and they've got, not only do they have a plane for every alignment, so one for chaotic neutral and one for chaotic evil and one for chaotic good, they've also got planes in between for chaotic neutral to evil and chaotic neutral to good, and like those alignments like almost don't even exist, but they have all these extra planes, and it really just seems like I missed one right there. It really just seems like they added all those planes just to add them, and it's just such a messy cosmology that I definitely simplified it when I created my own. There's one plane per alignment. That's it. But yeah, I just find where's the I hear it. Oh, we gotta go this way. Yeah, I just find their planar stuff very messy. Their the way they do like the official D&D mythology is just really ugly and amateurish in my opinion. Um, and I don't really like the fact that the universe, they're like the D&D worlds aren't really inside universes. They're inside these little tiny solar system bubbles that are inside a larger multiverse. Rather than the universe being a universe, it's not something I like, and so I've never been that interested in doing Planescape and going on adventures that are um, built around this cosmology that I don't really like. So I'm not actually a huge fan of it. I do have them in the astral plane right now. This is probably going to be it for planar adventures until much later, if ever. I mean, the bad guy does have like a little fragment of the plane Pandemonium, which is my chaotic neutral plane, as his base. He's kind of shunted the capital city that his people had before the Romans destroyed them into this pocket dimension. That's like a fragment of the plane of Pandemonium, but and there's only one way to get into it. They have to know kind of the secret word, and part of what they're going to probably have to do at some point is find that secret word. So that's, I think, going to be pretty cool. But other than that, and the current adventure in the astral plane, which hopefully will only take a couple of sessions, I don't intend to have a lot of planar stuff. Yeah, it's unfortunately the case. As a DM, I want to try to make my players as happy as possible, but it's unfortunately the case that my best friend, even though we have a lot of tastes in similar, there are certain things that we're not really aligned with in terms of what we like. And there's a lot of stuff that I think he wants to do that I just really don't want to DM. I might not mind playing, but I don't particularly want to DM. Like all his stuff about his character's girlfriend and about his character's mother, I don't have a lot of interest in making them significant parts of the story. And the planar stuff, I'm not planning to do a lot of planar adventures. I know he likes them, but it's just not my thing. I don't want to have to make it all up, and I don't like what's there in the literature from D&D. And I think he'd be better off if he ran it, because he knows a lot more about the established lore of the planes, and he could then run it better than I think I could. But he doesn't want to DM, so maybe someday. All right. Marvin says, good work at the warehouse. Paragon's kids will have some decent computers to learn on thanks to you. So Freak Olympics is going on. Man, look at the size of that story arc compared to some of the ones in the newer zones. So we're still going to have a lot of work to do with stopping the Freak Olympics, but that'll happen in another episode. Until then, I am Scrapperlock, and this is City of Heroes.